EMP. Pastor Wall was so gracious. You were listening to me before, but this is me now. Running a little late, but I am here. Traveled, misguided the time, how much it was going to take me, but I'm here on a beautiful Sunday morning, and thank you, Pastor Bruce Wall. He is producing today, and I so appreciate that. I was saying some good stuff. That's really good. I was saying about Shaw's, and about me pushing back the forces of darkness. And I will finish that story for you. I will finish that because it's an example of what Morality Moves is. But happy Sunday. God bless you. I have not really been in the studio for a couple of months. So happy New Year. A lot of things going on with me, but I'm here. Praise God. And I thank God for Pastor Bruce Wall and the ministry, Pastor Hobbs, Renee, everyone for the opportunity, Eric, to be here today. All right, but what was I saying? I was saying that I went to Shaw's supermarket. And what is Morality Moves? Morality is moving. It is actually doing something. And what happened? I saw very explicit magazines there. I was going to go about my business like I normally do. And probably was going to get some plantain and chips. Oh, because you can. Why not, right? Plantains and iced tea. And I was by the produce area, deli area, and I saw this very sexually explicit magazine. I'm like, what in the world is this doing here? And I look around, and I see young kids, women, and this is, I don't know if it was a women's swimsuit issue and all that entails. I was like, this should not be here. And I had a choice. I can either say, well, looking at the clock, I got to do something. I got to be somewhere else. Maybe the Lord will send somebody else to handle that. And of course, he already sent me. So it's my choice to decide what I was going to do. So I said, you know what? This is immoral. This should not be here. Let me go talk to the front end person. And so I did. I said, you know what? By the way, this magazine, XY magazine, is over by the deli area. She was just as surprised it was there. She's like, really? I said, yeah. I said, you mind moving that? She goes, not at all. And when I came back the next day, guess what? No magazine was there. And God taught me that. Was God going to send somebody? Was God going to send an angel, a magazine angel to remove that? No, he sent me. And that is just another example how we are salt and light and how we are the light. And as I was saying, nicely said, that to be light in darkness, you just go on and turn on the light. You go on and show up. Kind of like what I did today. But let me digress. Let me start again. Hello. I was saying some good stuff there. Kind of reminded myself as an intro there. But let me go back and say hello formally. Let you know I am back in the building, back in the house, starting off a brand new year with Morality Moves. And I thank God this is a great year, 2023. And if it's going to be a great new year. I hope you start off your year. So it's still March, so it's still the beginning of the year. So I hope that you're starting off the year right, with the year with the Lord, with your goals and great things that you expect from God, because God does nothing but great things. But what is Morality Moves? Morality Moves is Matthew 7:14. That narrow is the way that leads to eternal life, and few that find it. Morality Moves is moving in all regards of morality. And you might say, Jacqueline, I got my own thing going on. Whose morality is it? And I'm like, I'm glad you asked, because I am here to answer that question. It's God's morality. Last time I checked, the Bible has not changed. And the Bible will never change. The Bible is immutable. It does not change. So my morality, my definition of what right and wrong is, because you can't go on this world definition. One day you can drink coffee, next day you can't drink coffee. One day you can have red meat, next day you can't have red meat. Just in terms of food. But how about in terms of what's right and wrong, right? God says do not steal. God says don't commit adultery. God says don't lie, don't cheat. Whose morality is that? Last time I checked, the Ten Commandments, our criminal justice system is very similar to the Ten Commandments in terms of the laws and do what's right and what's wrong. So morality in terms of God's morality, in terms of what Christ contends the Lord calls what's right what's wrong. So every time I stand before you, it's always going to sit before you. It's God's morality, not my morality. Morality moves. That is the topic of the broadcast. Everything, if we're serious, love is action. For God so loved the world that he gave. God does. God is and he does. So morality does as well. Morality is going to move in terms of the community, in terms of the culture, in terms of imposing God's right and wrong into the culture, not mine. Last time I checked, I have one rule book and one guidebook. If the quarterbacks can have their playbook, I think the Christians should follow their rule book and their guidebook. That's the Bible. And I am unapologetically a Christian. So morality moves in terms of moving what's right, not my right, not what the world says is right, not what my mama says is right, even though what mama says is always right. You know what I'm saying? Not what mama says is right, but what God says is right. God forget what God says is right. His word. What does the Bible thus say? So we move in terms of what God says. And again, it's not morality sleeps. It's not morality sits, because you ain't doing nothing doing that way. But it's actually moving. It's movement. It's an aggressive yet respectful movement. And I hinge that on Matthew 7:14. That narrow is the way that leads to eternal life, and few that find it. But broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many. That's why you call it Broadway, the biggest avenue, right? The biggest street in the city, Broadway, because many people go on it. But God's way is narrow. So my emphasis and my umbrella theme of morality moves is God's narrow way. Is going to be our way. Is going to be my way. And God's ways is narrow. So I'll be here every fourth Sunday. Sometimes I forget. Oh my goodness. Every fourth Sunday from 3 to 4. I had to check the time. Every fourth Sunday from 3 to 4, I'm back on. This is my first broadcast of March 2023. I'm really excited to be here. And I'll be here every fourth Sunday from 3 to 4 o'clock. So I hope you listen. I'm going to challenge you respectfully. I'm going to push back the culture and all its foolishness, and just shine a light on what God's word says in terms of all the many depravity things that's transpiring in our culture. Emphasis music towards the youth, and also let you know what's happening in terms of legislation, because you ain't gonna hear about it. You're gonna hear about a little kitten being lost, about the weather, but many times you're not gonna hear about life-changing legislation until it actually happens. So I'm also gonna talk to you about that. I come a lot. Sometimes I might talk a little bit, but I always try to come with information so you can always leave with what's going on. And I cannot complain. I cannot complain. The good Lord wakes me up today. This is a day that the Lord hath made. I will be glad and rejoice in it. I'm not going to complain. I do not like to complain, because I am reminded. When I think of morality moves, I think of all the great leaders. Pastor Wall always has pictures when I come into the studio of these great leaders who've gone before us, and they are supposed to be our guidepost. I'm not complaining if I knew that Harriet Tubman went 100 miles to save some slaves. You know what? I think I can come here 2 hours from my house to come into the movie theater. Into the broadcast. So I am not complaining. When I'm reminded of Fannie Lou Hamer, who, because she wanted to vote in the 60s, her home was shot up, I'm not complaining. I will not complain. So I want to remind you of all the great leaders who've gone before, because in our world today, let me get it on my soapbox today, of our push microwave, instant food, instant me, get a pill to lose weight, we are forgetting the costs of what people have gone through so I can sit here today. My dad used to always say, nothing good comes easy. Yet we want all this good stuff easy. It don't work that way. This is not Burger King. So I want to remind you today of a few great people who actually stood in the gap and who actually moved immorality. They didn't talk about morality. They didn't have a T-shirt say "Let morality move." They put themselves out in there for you and me today, and for you and me today. And of course, Martin Luther King. And I know Martin Luther King he was human. He wasn't Jesus, but he put his life on the line so many people could have freedom today. But if I talk to you, so I'm going to talk to you today about a few people who actually, just to remind us, who actually pushed back the flow of degradation, of just really stood in the gap. They stood in the gap. I will talk to you first about, I probably talked to you already about this, but hey, a refresher is always nice. Ida B. Wells, Princess of the Press, that's what they called her, in the 1800s. She had to be she probably wasn't more than 5 feet. And I'm going to remind you that nor was Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman, she wasn't even more than 5 feet as well. In other words, it's not your size. It's not the size of you, but it's the size of your heart. That's Theodore Roosevelt said that. Something along that line. But Ida B. Wells, Princess of the Press, she was amazing. Her parents died early on, typhoid or some type of disease that transpired during that time, the early 1800s. She wanted to be a school teacher. She was the oldest of her siblings. She decided to take care of her siblings when her parents died, and she also went to school to become a teacher. Now, very focused individual, took care of her siblings, and during the time when she was a journalist, she saw what was transpiring around her. So morality moves is moving in your day, but also keeping your eyes open what's going on in the culture. And again, she had a choice, right? And this is the 1800s, right? So all that goes along with it. And one of the things that transpired to her is that she was forcibly removed from a train, because it was segregated, and she refused to move. We don't hear that about her. She refused to move from a train because it was forcibly segregated, and she said, "No, I'm not going to get off." And she sued and won $500. Where do we hear that today? And if I say that quickly, but let me not say that too quickly. This was somebody this is Women's Month. Ida B. Wells, a woman and a black woman, so double discrimination, right? She said, "You know what? I'm not going to sit in the black area. I'm going to sit in the white area." And she said, "I'm not moving." And she won. She won. She won, but eventually the Supreme Court reversed that. She also had friends, Will, Calvin, and Thomas, that owned black grocery stores across white ones. And this is where she started seeing what her culture, what's transpiring, what's going on. And she opened her eyes, and she made herself available to what's transpiring. So what is that? Again, morality moves. You got a choice. She did not have to do that, but she opened her eyes to see what's going on. Her good friend, Calvin and Thomas, who owned black grocery stores across from white ones, consequently, they were murdered by a mob, and they were Ida's friends. They were murdered because they were making more money than the white grocery store owners across the street. That's the only reason they were murdered. And she saw that, and she spoke up against that. She wrote in the press to boycott. She wrote in the press. She got really upset about what was going on, and she saw the discrimination. She saw what was transpiring. She saw her culture. She saw what was going on in the community. And do we see what's going on in the community, or do we just let things go by? She also wrote in the press to boycott the segregated streetcars. I didn't know that. She said also too, when she saw what was happening with killing of her friends, and also too about the segregation in the streetcars, she did something about it. She was writing and she wrote about that. So she's like, she said boycott them. Before Martin Luther King said to boycott Wonder Bread, right, and A&P supermarkets, because he had Operation Breadbasket, the economy. Before Martin Luther King did that, Ida B. Wells did that. She used her pen and her paper. So what are you using? I have to insert that, and I got to stop because I don't want to just go on and go on. Again, example of morality moves. What are you using your day and time? We got TikTok. We got Facebook. What don't we got? I can't even name all of them. I'm old school. I couldn't even name all of them. We got pen and paper. We got our legs. What are we using in order to sweep the house and keep this culture clean, right? So she was one person in 1890. She did the anti-lynching campaign. You can't stop Ida B. Wells. You cannot stop her. And yet, I'm going to keep reminding us of what she did, right? You couldn't stop her. And due to her reporting on the U.S. lynching, the South was embarrassed, and she publicized what was going on. Black pastors at that time did not support her. Again, she was a woman, but that didn't stop her. She battled racism and sexism. So in Women's History Month, that's a great woman to talk about. And then I put there that she was uncompromising. I gotta stop on that. Are you compromising? Do you go with the flow? God allows us to be where we're at. Like I said before, when you die, you're born. We don't know when we die. We know when we're born. Most of us do. We know when we're born. We don't know when we die. But what do you do with the dash in between? You're responsible for that dash. I'm responsible for that dash. What are you doing with the dash in between? Now, Ida B. Wells, with the time that she had, she was uncompromising. Are you compromising? A lot of us are compromising because this is not how we want to leave this world for the generation behind us. We compromise too much. But she was uncompromising in the midst of a mob, in the midst of being a woman, in the midst of racism. And that's real racism back in the day. We have racism today, but that was blatant. That was just blatant. That was blatant racism. Institutionalized racism, right? Legal racism. You sit here, you drink here, and yet she was uncompromising. That's why I'm not complaining, right? And so she was a great person. She was gallant fight for men and women. She's a heritage for young, and people should be proud. So I will always talk about Ida B. Wells. She was uncompromising. And as you can see, it'll always take one or two. Even Christ called 12. With a few, you make a majority. With Christ, one with Christ is a majority. Thurman Marshall, another great, amazing person for civil rights. We forget about him. I will not only talk about him in Black History Month, that's somebody you should talk with all the time. October 1st, 1967, he was the first black U.S. Supreme Court justice ever. But Thurman Marshall, he was in the South. He slept in cars because he couldn't go to the hotel. He had the KKK after him because he stood up in terms of rights again also. Before he was Thurman Marshall, he was a person who was fighting for individuals to go to white colleges, excuse me. He was the one representing the one black individuals trying to go into the South, trying to go to that white college. That was Thurman Marshall. And he was a civil rights crusader. We do not talk enough about him. But before the days when blacks were allowed to go into hotels, he slept in his car. And they knew when Thurman Marshall was coming. And he had to always be hidden, even though he was so tall. He always had to hide because people are always trying to kill him because he was black. His grandfather owned a grocery store, and he had a strong sense of ambition. And he was the one who won the 1954 case. That's where you might learn from him. Plessy versus Ferguson, when desegregation was finally abolished. He was the one who did that case. I think it was May 17th, 1954. Thurman Marshall. But before he was Thurman Marshall, he was another person for morality moves. He had a burning sense, and he had a strong sense of ambition. Now, do you have a strong sense of ambition? I hope you do. Because the Lord says you are fearfully and wonderfully made. God doesn't make junk. And if he doesn't make junk, you should have a strong sense of ambition, a strong sense of pride, because God has equipped you with everything that you need to be your own Thurman Good Marshall in this generation of today. And that's what Morality Moves is about. Stirring the hearts of people that they would get out and continue working hard in terms of righteousness. Now, again, this is he became in 1967 the first black U.S. Supreme Court justice. But in 1954, he won his landmark case with desegregation. But he was way before then. He was a lawyer. Way before then, he was doing right before he got the acclimates and all this great grandeur. And he didn't do it for that. Now, what are you doing for? Now, I know I'm not doing for that. I'm paying my own gas and stuff coming here. I ain't doing for that, right? You have to be living for the audience of one. Not the audience of TikTok, not the audience of Facebook, or Facebook friends. They're not your friends. All those people are not your friends, a whole bunch of strangers. Who are you living for? That when you come at the end, now this is who I'm living for. When I come at the end of my days, I want to hear, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." Enter into joy of my kingdom. Well done. Because I have an audience of one. I don't want him to say, "Well, what have you done?" No. Well, what have you done? With the time, with the talents, with this time that he allowed me to live, I don't want the Lord to say that. What have I done? What can I throw at his feet? And by you being, and yes, by us accepting Christ and living, being salt and light, but what else God might be calling us to do in our generation, in our time? Like he gave Esther, for this time was Esther. What time, what gifts, what talents that God has given you that he needs you to employ the time that he's given you. We have to always be cognizant of that. And that's why I always stop. And when I come to Morality Moves, is to stop. Because guess what? We are being advertised to, we are being preached to every day. We are given every day, they are telling us what to wear, what to drive, right? What to eat, right? Especially us women. We got all this type of makeup. We are always constantly being bombarded with voices, right? And now even when you go to the gas station, something be blowing up on some little TV set. I'm like, I can't have no peace when you pump the gas. So you got to turn off all that noise and listen to the Lord through his word, listen to the Lord through the gifts and the talents he's given us, and say, okay, God, this is the time you've given me, what you want me to do with the time that you've given me. Through my work, through my education, where you have me at, how am I giving you the best that you want from me? While you do that, change areas of the world. Change areas of the world. We are all responsible for cleaning this house while we're here and making it better for the generation that comes behind us. And quite frankly, that's why I'm here, because a whole bunch of hot mess is transpiring, and I can't allow that on my watch. You look at TV, look at the radios, you look at the music. There's a whole bunch of foolishness. You know what I'm saying? And I got receipts for that to let you know why I'm here. and I'm here because I need to hear, because I'm talking against that. But Thurman Good Marshall had a strong sense of ambition. Now, he was late at night, people are sleeping, he was fighting the cause, sleeping in uncomfortable cars, just like Martin Luther King, because they were not allowed to sleep in hotels or friends' houses, and KKK behind them, and just a myriad of problems. Now we come today, TV set on, click, microwave on, click, fast food. We got it good, but we're gonna take account. God's gonna hold us account for how we're living. That's all I'm saying. God's gonna hold us account for how we're living, because we only get one life. And like a coin, you can only spend it once. So how you gonna spend it? Watching Netflix and TV? Now don't get me wrong, that has its place. But if it's 24/7, you're out of place. If it's 24/7, you are out of place. God gave you one life, and it ain't just to be. It ain't all about how you feel and it's about using your gifts and talents to help, to go out. And we are God's army. That's why I'm here. always going to the churches. We are God's army. And an army has to be equipped, an army has to be ready, and an army has to go out spiritually, collectively, to push back the works of darkness. And that's why as Christians, that's something that we shall always be. As you get your degree, fight. As you go to work, fight against the works of darkness. As you go to the gym, fight against the works of darkness. We are God's representatives as wherever we go. Case in point, as I went to go to Shaw's, I said, no, this magazine should not be here. Many more Christians of us should be standing up against foolishness and not acquiescing with foolishness. Your silence, this is what's transpiring now. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Crickets, right? Crickets. Beyonce's church girl. This is what you heard. Crickets. Imagine that. How in the world Beyonce going to come out with a song called Church Girl and you hear this? What? Crickets. I did silence. I just didn't say nothing. I said nothing. That should not be. Beyonce should not come up, and we just have to pray against her because it's not Beyonce. It's the systems on top of that. She needs Jesus like anybody else. We just have to ask that she be singing songs appropriately and not co-signing all that stuff. But we don't hear nothing, right? We don't hear nothing. We don't hear nothing when Cardi B is on Nickelodeon. With the kids, what you hear? That. And that should not be. And that it should be a holy indignation against such foolishness. And I have more information about that. And then so we just sit back and continue the onslaught of degradation, of perversion, and our babies behind us looking at this foolishness? No. That should not be. Dolores Tucker, back in 2007. Dolores Tucker, 2007. She was an NAACP board member. She was the first black Secretary of State in 1971. She used to wear a turban, but she was fierce in her time. She did morality moves in her time. She was an outlier in her time. And she said, you know what? She said, and she'd also chair the National Political Congress of Black Women. She said, wait a minute. Now, I don't like how this Tupac songs are going down. Talking about women are bees and W's, whores. And she goes, wait a minute now. Flag on the play now. This is immoral, inappropriate. But she was a singular voice at that time. You might be like, you're like, what? This was a singular voice at the time. Now, was this in year 1800s, 1900s? No, because I told you about Tupac. So this was like during 1990s or 2000, and she talked against that. She died in 2005. 2005 she died. So this was like 1990s, 2000 with Tupac. And Tupac, and again, I never blame the artist. It's always the industry behind it. What sells and what degradation can you keep pushing on people? And sometimes the artists just get caught up in the same thing. So she talked against that. She's like, no. Wait a minute now. Women are not these things. Now, this was in the 1990s. Now, what's this, 2023, right? Do you hear continuing dissent? No. But she said, wait a minute. Even though she was ridiculed about that, she said, wait a minute, this is very degrading and this is irresponsible. Women are not these things. She was laughed at. She was, they even made fun of her in rap songs, referring to her, but she kept going. And she said, no, this is wrong. She drew that line in the sand. And I'm glad she did. Because I was one of those young girls at that time that she was fighting for at that time, saying, no, you are not that thing. And she kept on going to say that lyrics about how do you want it, these were the titles back in the day, why they call you B, all those things, and I can't even continue to read those. She was like, that's inappropriate, that's immoral, and that is wrong. Now you might say to me, but Jacqueline, what? That's just musical expression. Oh, all right now. All right, that's just musical expression. Well, I'll go back to Philippians 4:8. Now I'm going back to the word. Whatsoever is pure, and Paul said, finally, my brother, whatsoever is pure, whatever is clean, whatever is a good report, think on those things, not on degradation. So again, the line between what's immoral, because nowadays you got to define what's immoral, which is sad. But this was something definitely immoral, right? Definitely immoral. And this was 2007. Something definitely immoral. And it went on to say that some African Americans, and this was 2007, refused to join C. Dolores Tucker's campaign. Some African Americans, because she often paired her efforts with those of Bill Bennett. This was back in the day, a conservative Republican. So some people like, no, because you're aligning yourself with a conservative Republican. And she was aligning herself with righteousness. She wasn't going Republican or Democrat. She was a Democrat at that time. She was going with what's right. So again, when it comes to the lines of God's right and wrong, there's no such thing as a political party. And it went on to say, but the critics of the music have run out of excuses. It's time to pick up where Tucker left off and declare language that degrades females, whether uttered by Don Imus or rappers, must not be tolerated. Oh, Don Imus, let me go back to that. Don Imus, so if we're talking about free speech, Don Imus called, when I'm from New Jersey, called New Jersey basketball players, the women had nappy hair, something very inappropriate, he said. Now, why could he be, and he was fired from that, which he should have, Don Imus. He was a broadcaster at that time. Again, this was the 1990s, 2000. And Don Imus, the broadcaster, he called when he saw a basketball show, the women's basketball players, he called them nappy heads. That was so inappropriate and offensive. And he was let go. But yet we allow rappers to call women even more offensive things, just equally even more offensive, yet that's promoted and it's celebrated. Do you see the contradiction? If you try to get out the matrix, if you see the contradiction, but the contradiction is today. It's the same thing. Now this was back in April 22, 2007, because I used to collect everything. And this is 2023. You would think it had written today. And she died in 2005. So what am I saying? I'm saying that nothing really has changed today. Nothing really has changed today. And if you look at it, you know some of these music lyrics are so inappropriate. And it's just to keep pushing back. Keep pushing back. And the thing is that our silence, when you're silent, that means you're co-signing. Silence means you're co-signing with what's transpiring, what's going on. Back in the time of Hitler, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he was Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was somebody who decided to move in morality, really move in God. Not move in where God called him to do. In July of 1940s, year before Hitler really has really came on the scene. A couple years before Hitler came on the scene, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which was a German pastor, just an amazing man of God. I wish we knew more about him. He came to the United States in July, a couple years before Hitler came on the scene. He just wanted to come out to the United States. He felt the Lord calling him back to Germany, not knowing what was going to transpire. He said, let me go back to Germany. Again, another example of somebody who moved in morality. He said, let me go back to my homeland. And that's when all of a sudden it started against the Jews. Hitler started riling them up, the Jewish people, putting symbols on the door to let them know they're Jewish, started taking them to concentration camps, right? And these are the Jewish people who are in the churches, who are their neighbors. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer, German pastor, he said, what's going on here? He said, wait a minute, what's going on? What's going on to our brethren? And he went to the pastors in Germany. And I read about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He saw what was transpiring. He said, wait a minute. What are they doing to our Jewish brethren? We got to talk against Hitler. And this German pastor saying, no, this is probably not so bad. Again, dismissive. No, it's probably not so bad. It can't be that bad. Like, no, something's happening. We have to talk against this. This is wrong. And it was starting slowly. This is wrong what Hitler's doing. And the German pastors, they just started saying, no, this Hitler's in control. It can't be as bad. Can't be as bad. And he kept talking against it. And he kept talking against it. And he said, no, we have to do something about that. And it was also so that when they would hear, I think Dietrich Bonhoeffer, somebody said that when the German congregation would hear the train passing, the Jewish prisoners being passing by to Auschwitz, they would just sing louder. They would sing louder. When they would be passing by, they'd be singing louder. And just closing a blind eye. And when and that's what they said, when they would hear that the trains with the Jewish people on it, what would they do? They'd just sing louder. So they wouldn't hear it. So he decided, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he wasn't even 50, 40 something. He decided to go against Hitler. And because he went against Hitler, he got caught by Hitler, and he was executed. A couple years executed, months before the United States came to save Germany. He was executed. He was hanged, and he was meant to be married, but he gave all he had. He gave all he had. In spite of his colleagues, in spite of the other pastors, he said, no, this is wrong. And he gave it with his life. He wasn't even 50. That was Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And he was coming to the United States to live a great life, but he felt the Lord called him back. He called him back right into fire, and he gave everything. He gave everything. And do we, first, are we willing to give everything? First, are we very clear what God's calling us to? And are we giving everything to it? Or we have a whole bunch of excuses, right? Whole bunch of excuses. And then also too, are we singing louder when we hear the degradation pass us by? Are we singing louder when are we trying to dull in the cries of what's transpiring around us? As long as we're okay in our life, feel that that's not our responsibility. If God is affected by it, we should be affected by it. If it bothers God, then it should bother us. And if it doesn't bother us, then we should say, Lord, put in it to bother us, because we are his children. We are the salt and light of the world. And what does light have to do? Show up. Everyone else is showing up. We might as well show up. Like Tony Evans said, everyone else is coming out of the closet. We might as well come out the closet too, right? We might as well come out and say who we are in Christ and who we are in Christ. So that is an example of people that are showing up. And I always stop on that because this is 2023. God did not be born in 1800s or the 1600s. He allowed us to be born when we're born, right? And he knows when we're going to go. And we say, Lord, you guide our days, guide our time, and what you want us to do. Martin Luther King, 50,000 people decided that they were not going to walk for 381 days. What's that? The bus boycott. And do you know that it was the Pullman porters who decided to help with the bus boycott? There were so many people involved in that, and they were able to get Martin Luther King involved. There's just so much history of a community getting involved. It wasn't this isolation of I'm going to get mine. Nope. How can we get things together? And I think we need to get back to that. Definitely of how we should get things together. The Freedom Rides, 1961, student sit-in movement, 1960. And these were youth that were involved. So we can't dismiss the youth. These were youth that were involved trying to do what's right. So there was always people doing right so that we can have today. And as I look through, I'm just reminded of just the stance that people have taken. And one person does make a difference, but collectively, wow, it is mighty, definitely mighty. In terms of picturing, transpiring what's going on, you can kind of see that a time in the 80s or the 70s, it was bad, but now it is just increasing. It's just continued to increase. And in 2010, the American Psychology, I always have a hard time saying that. The American Psych Association, I'm just going to say psych. In 2010, the American Psych Association Task Force, now that's a mouthful. 2010 American Psych Association Task Force concluded that the sexualization of girls in media, so this is not me saying it, so this is where I come with my receipts. Always ask for receipts. So 2010, the American Psych Association Task Force concluded that the sexualization of girls in media is a serious societal problem and the consequences of teenage boys are no less grave. I'll say it again. In 2010, the American Psych Association Task Force, so they had to do a task force. Now, I told you about 2005 when Miss Tucker died, in 1990s with Tupac. Now, this is 2010. The American Psych Association Task Force concluded that the sexualization of girls in media, so we say media, music, let's just go the whole thing, TikTok, might as well make it to today, it's a serious societal problem, and the consequences, I'm not forgetting our boys now, because the boys too, our consequences of teenage boys are no less grave. No less grave. This is 2010, right? 2010. I'm just going to continue going, and that's of the girls. But you can see that, I can't. You can see that with the music lyrics, with the videos. I don't watch that. I watch that sometimes quickly, just for content, just to know what I'm talking about. But the Parents Television Council, this is also Parents Television Council, that they found in May 2016, February to May 2016, study demonstrates that all the networks, all the free networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, are increasingly and purposely creating programs in which teenage and even child characters use overly sexualized and adult language. One more time. The Parents Television Council, you can Google them. They're a great clearinghouse just in terms of what's transpiring, in terms of content in the youth and kids. Because you remember back in the day, something used to come on TV, you used to go and change it. You got to physically change it, right? My dad, come and change it. Now you just click it. And even these commercials are getting ridiculous. But back in 2016, a study demonstrates that all the free stations, ABC, CBS, NBC, are increasingly and purposely increasingly creating programs in which teenage and even child characters use overly sexualized and adult language. Even some of their cartoons, adult language. And studies has been done that they know that's a negative correlation, but because of profit, they just continue doing it. So what did we go back? We went back for Tupac, right? 2010, that it was so bad that you had to do a task force from the Psych Association. Don't know why I can't say psychology. I don't know why I can say that. Right, that there's something transpiring between the connection with the two, and just even recently with the courts. I don't know if it was Facebook, I forget what it was, but that young girls are being affected by all this media, and they want to lessen that with some of the, I don't know if it was TikTok, someone, I got to get back to that. But there's a linkage between how much teenagers view and how it's affected to them. How it's affected to them. But do you really need all the digits and all the receipts to know that? You kind of know, you know that. Your parents teach you that. You know when you go out to be covered, right? You know what to say, what not to say, you know what's respectful. But now it's come a day that it's just becoming so blatant. Hence the reason for morality moves. So my objective is to push back more the focus on the music lyrics. I have Church Girl here. I told you about Cardi B, Belkadis, that's her real name. Again, it's never the artist, it's the industry. I think if we push back and say, you know what, the artists, we want them to sing other things, they would. Because you know what, I know it's the industry. It's never the individual. You always got to go up higher. Same as you go to Walmart. It's never the associates. It's always the managing directors behind it, and they're just as much as victims, to be honest with you. That we push back and say, no, we want something different. We want to say, we're not with this. Cease and desist. We're not with this. We have a whole, which is awesome, which is good. The Me Too movement, good. Especially Women's Month, awesome. So where is this stop the degradation movement on our kids? Where is that? Crickets. And yet you can't have a childhood, and it's just pervasive, more so in the African American community. It is not right. It's really pervasive. The music lyrics, it's not even soft porn. It's pornographic. I mean, the FCC with the Super Bowl with Rihanna, they had over 100 complaints because of really sexually explicit song and also dancing. And if I say twerking, I don't know what a twerk looks like, but it's very sexually explicit. Why is that? Why is that even mentioned, twerking, right? Besides all of that, it is just extremely degrading, and there should be a push against it. There should be new C. Dolores Tuckers pushing back, because she stood for me today. And who's staying for the kids today? Who's staying for the kids today? But instead, we're just applauding. And do you know that Cardi B, she's on Nickelodeon. She had a Nickelodeon with the kids. Nickelodeon is kids, right? So when we're quiet, we are co-signing, and we're telling the kids that it's okay to have very sexually explicit lyrics. It's okay to look like you are the ladies of the night, right? And there's no correlation between how you look and how you are as a woman. That's just ridiculous. That's foolishness and ridiculous on the highest level. And God made us beautiful in His image. Beautiful. Oh my goodness, God does not make junk. We are a masterpiece because we are in an image of the Master. That's what I say. That's why I have my confidence in the Lord. Nobody can tell me nothing. Because I know in whom I am and who I believe. I've been a Christian almost 20 years. I know I don't look it. Thank you. I know I look good. But I know I look good, yeah. But He's never proved me wrong. He's been awesome and amazing. And He's made me a masterpiece. So God doesn't make junk. He doesn't. If our fingerprints no two are alike, that is who that young lady is. That's who that young man is. But if you listen to this, and I would say, mothers and parents, stop buying this junk. Martin Luther King stopped it. He said, you know what? He was going with the economic movement. He also had the poor people's movement. And he pushed back against A&P. He said, you know what? You know what Martin Luther King did? Because I studied Martin Luther King. He said, okay, you don't want to hire black people? Ain't nobody going to eat here. Nobody shop here. And guess what? They didn't shop there, right? They didn't shop there. He said, no, you're not going to shop there. You're not going to hire people, A&P? All right, then don't shop there, everybody. And they didn't shop there. And they had to call back Martin Luther King and said, oh, because he's not the one. He had to call him back. They hired black people, and then they started shopping there. Ladies, gentlemen, don't buy the junk. Don't buy it. Stop buying the foolishness, right? Stop buying that. That's poison in the ear. Poison in the ear, poison in the head, poison outcome. Junk in, junk out. Listen to those lyrics. Junk in, junk. How you going to do well in school with junk in and junk out? right? Getting behind that car, junk in and junk out, right? You got to say, we're not with this, cease and desist. That's it. So when you hear it on the radio station, call in. When you see it on put your comments in. Put your comments in. Let people know. We can now comment all over the place. Come on, comment. Comment for righteousness. Comment for Christ. Because that little baby watching, you got to be the standard against him. So when I say move immorality, move. We can move now, right? You can move with your mouth. You can move with your hands there. You know, kids be moving quick. Boy, they type quick, they're texting. I tell you, I got nieces and nephews. I tell you, they be typing quick, but they move with that, right? Move with that. And now we have a day that you can move and say something about that. Make your voice heard, because guess what? Right? Why you think, and don't tell me, say, oh, Jacqueline, my voice don't count. It doesn't matter what I think. You make your voice count every time you go to McDonald's and buy a Big Mac. You keeping them in business. You make your voice count every time you go to that sneaker store. You tell your voice. You're moving with your feet. You're saying yes with your feet, right? You're saying yes with your feet. You're saying yes with your dollar bill in your pocketbook. I got a few in there now, but you say yes with your dollar bill. Where's this dollar bill going? You gonna go to Jimmy Joe's store, or you gonna go to Mary's store? You say that. So, as I sure went on a long tangent, right? But as I come back and say, move in morality. As this week goes on, we are the salt and light. Be salt and light this week. I challenge you. As I wrapping up, be salt and light this week. Be salt and light in righteousness. Where you go, what you see. Call that music station. Tell them exactly what I said. Tell Jacqueline said, we're not with this. Cease and desist. We want better for our kids. So I want to thank you for listening to me. It has been a pleasure listening to The Heart of Morality Moves. Thank you so much for listening. And I'll always remind you, move with morality. Don't sit with it. Don't curdle it. Do something with it. God gave you a voice, gave you feet, gave you a mind. He knows what's right and wrong. And because you move, you helping clean up for the person behind you. As C. Dolores Tucker did for us, do that today. Do that today for this week. So God bless you. Thank you so much for listening to me. It has been another blessing being with you today. Again, I'm going to always be here every third. I always get that wrong. Oh boy. Every fourth Sunday from 3 to 4 o'clock, I will be here, and I hope to see you. And again, tell them, we're not with this. Cease and desist. God bless you all, and have a wonderful Sunday.
Everything's changing. No longer my will I see.